who's joining from the US and obviously everywhere else in the world. I'm not sure what the time is, but we want to welcome everyone to a very exciting presentation and a meeting today. We have Dr. Joyce Choe and Mercy Ballard. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So I hope I got that remotely right. So today we're going to discuss gut health. As we know, 70 to 80% of our gut health is in, or 70 to 80% of our immunity is in our gut. And our immunity also decides how we cope with different diseases. So we can't think of anyone better to explain to us than Dr. Joyce and Mercy about gut health and how to deal with certain diseases then in that case. So I'll quickly introduce Dr. Joyce and Mercy to everyone. If you don't know about Dr. Mercy and Dr. Joyce and Mercy, so Dr. Joyce is a medical doctor with master's degree in public health. She is a board certified ophthalmologist who has been in practice for 20 years. She's helped to develop 2 online courses, medmissionary.com helps educate, encourage, and train Adventists for medical missionary work. And autoimmune recovery plan.com is a powerful online course that helps people learn a plant-based therapeutic approach to healing the leaky gut. Dr. Joyce and Mercy are also the authors of Autoimmune Plant-Based Cookbook. And also, I will also introduce Mercy. So Mercy is a founder and director of Years Restored. Mercy went to medical school in Mexico and has worked as an IV infusion nurse in the US for over 2 decades. When Mercy developed unusual symptoms of celiac disease in 2004, she had to embark on her own search for answers. Maybe we can, with Q&A, we can ask Mercy to tell us more about her journey in healing. So, and then we can maybe ask about the prayer rally as well that's being organized for another 6 weeks, I believe. Is that correct?
I think it's about 9 weeks now.
Yeah, true. So we will talk more about that. We are a bit short on time, as Mercy can be with us for a little bit longer. So we will ask whenever we are ready, maybe with Dr. Joyce praying first and then getting into the presentation, please.
Okay. All right. Okay. And will you allow me to share my screen too? It
Yes.
won't let me, right? Okay. All right. I will pray with us all before we start. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, as we start this time together, we ask that you'd be here, that you would send your Holy Spirit, give us wisdom and discernment. We thank you so much for hearing and answering. In Jesus' name, amen.
You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, excellent. All right. And I'm going to do slideshow from current slide. Very good. Okay. All right. Are you able to see that screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to thank you for inviting me. How do you pronounce your name, Sosi? Is it Sosi?
Sose.
Sosa. Is that correct, Sose?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to thank you for inviting us to be here. This is the name of the company that we started. It's called Wholeness for Life, and it's based on an acronym. The acronym of wholeness, and each of those letters of wholeness represents laws of health. Some of you may be familiar with the 8 laws of health, like New Start. These are the 9 laws of health, and they include water, habits, oxygen, love, environment, nutrition, exercise, sunlight, and sleep. And so the additional law of health that is here that you don't find maybe in New Start and some of the others is that one of the environment, because we're very concerned about the role that the environment, toxins and chemicals and these types of things play in our health. Now, Mercy and I are very interested in this subject of eating for the healthy immune system because so many of our chronic health problems have to do with the immune system that is not functioning properly. Like if you think about it, allergies, that has to do with the immune system that is not able to tolerate even, dust and grasses and things that you should be able to go outside and play in the grass and stuff. And then cancer has to do with the immune system that's not able to identify cells that are growing abnormally. And then autoimmune disease has to do with an immune system that's not able to identify self as self and keep track of what should stay and what should go. And so it's very important that we learn how to protect the immune system. And the thing that we want to talk about today is how to eat for a healthy immune system, because this is the basis of everything that you're going to do. You eat 2-3 times a day. Some people eat more. And so we have to figure out what it is that we can do to protect. Now, it's especially important to understand that all disease begins in the gut. This is something that was written by Hippocrates, that all disease begins in the gut. And if you think about it, how about the common cold? How about, when you get a pneumonia, is that something that begins in the gut? Well, it is, if you understand that the gut houses the majority of your immune system. 70% of the immune system is housed in the gut, and the gut is essential for any healthy immune system. So let us look to see what all is involved in the digestive system. So here we have the digestive organs. You have the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the small and large intestine, and the rectum and the anus. The accessory organs are the tongue, teeth, salivary glands, the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. And here I have a diagram that shows you what those different parts of the digestive system look like. We're going to talk about each one of those parts. Now, the mouth is a part of the digestive system that we don't really think about, right? Most of us just know that we like food that tastes a certain way, that feels a certain way, that looks a certain way, and that's what we're concerned about. Food goes in, it goes out, and what happens in between, we're not sure. So, but this is an important thing. The mouth is the one part of digestion where you have a choice in what happens. You have a choice what you put in your mouth, and you have a choice on how long it stays in there. You have a choice on how much food you put in there. And so these are all things that are very important. We find that when you put food in your mouth, it's not just the quality of the food. We're used to thinking that, you should eat organic, you should eat unprocessed, and you should have good quality food. But it's also very important how long it stays in your mouth. And what we mean by that is how much are you chewing? Chewing allows the food to mix with the salivary amylase, which is an enzyme that breaks down sugar, that breaks down carbohydrates. And this is called salivary amylase. What chewing does is that as you are mixing that saliva with your food, as it is breaking down, you are preparing your body so that your body will know that a certain type of food is going to come down. Like, as you're chewing, your body's saying, hey, Joyce, don't be surprised, an apple is coming down. And the longer you chew, it's not surprising that this increases the nutrients that are going to be absorbed from the food. Because if you can think about it, if you don't chew your food very well, this unchewed food is going to go down into your digestive system, and some of it will not get digested. So you're not going to have the benefits of eating these great foods if you don't chew. And when you chew longer, it also decreases the amount of calories that are consumed, because a lot of times we inhale our food and we swallow a lot of it before we realize, hey, I was actually full. I didn't need to eat that. And so the longer you chew, it decreases the amount of calories that you actually do eat. So the mouth is very, very important. It is very important that you put in smaller quantities of food into the mouth and you let it sit there for a long time, chewing it very well, mixing it with the saliva. Okay, so that's step number one. Now, the saliva is made up of mostly water. Now, if you talk to some people, and you can see that their mouth is really dry, these are people who are dehydrated. Their digestion is not going to be so good, right? Because you need good saliva for you to be able to digest. And so you want to be drinking a lot of water so that your salivary glands can produce the 1 to 1.5 quarts of saliva that are produced daily. And in the saliva, you have electrolytes, mucus, white blood cells, waste matter, antibodies, and lysozyme and enzymes. All of these things have purposes to protect your body, to help with the immune system, like the lysozyme, for instance, the antibodies. You know, the saliva also protects the teeth from decay, protects the mucosa from drying out. And so if you are not drinking enough water, you're not going to have good dental health, possibly, right? And so it's really important that we adhere to all the laws of health. Now, the esophagus is a tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. And what we are seeing a lot of today is a condition called esophagitis. Anytime you have an itis at the end of a word, it simply means inflammation. And so esophagitis is inflammation of the esophagus. It can be associated with reflux. And those of you who have, you can taste your food after you've eaten it, and, you're having issues of GERD at night when you sleep, you have all this acid coming up. That's going to contribute to inflammation of the esophagus. Esophagitis can also be associated with food sensitivities, and a condition called eosinophilic esophagitis, which is a condition that's associated with lots of allergies, food sensitivities, and also with medications. Medications can contribute to inflammation here, as well as various infections, and certain substances that you ingest may also cause inflammation of the esophagus. The stomach is the next part. So you have the esophagus, which connects the mouth to the stomach. Now you have the stomach, and the stomach produces gastric juices, and these gastric juices help with digestion. The gastric juice is composed of mucus, of hydrochloric acid. There are cells in the stomach that also produce this thing called intrinsic factor. And intrinsic factor is really important because it's important for vitamin B12 absorption. Pepsinogen is an enzyme that is produced by the stomach, and it helps to break down protein. Water is the chief element in this gastric juice, as well as electrolytes. Now, in the stomach, you have pepsinogen, which is that enzyme that works with hydrochloric acid to produce, the hydrochloric acid, when it works on the pepsinogen, it produces an active form of the enzyme called pepsin. And then you have fat being broken down by an enzyme called lipase, and you have carbohydrates that are continuing to have the digestive process through the mechanical churn, what they call peristalsis, I think, of the stomach. And it's simply this mechanical work of breaking up the food. Now, protein digestion happens only in the stomach. So if you don't have good protein digestion happening here, it's not going to happen anywhere else, right? And so you need, for good protein digestion, you need to have pepsinogen produced, you need to have hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid. If you don't have that hydrochloric acid, you are not going to have good protein breakdown. Okay, so let's look at some things that are going to decrease the gastric acid that's produced. Okay. Gastric acid is reduced when you have things like autoimmune disease. They found that 80% of untreated rheumatoid arthritis patients have reduced maximum gastric acid output. And this gastric acid reduction may increase the risk of cancers, dementia, lupus, pneumonias, gut infections, small intestinal bowel overgrowth, alterations of the microbiome of the gut, iron deficiency, anemia, allergies, asthma, and death. Now, this decreased gastric acid production decreases protein digestion, of course, and so it causes people to have more food sensitivities, and that's what is associated too with a lot of these conditions. Now, what are medications that are going to decrease gastric acid output? There are a lot of people who think that they have too much acid, and so they'll take like Tums and what we call proton pump inhibitors. These are very commonly prescribed medications. 15 million patients were prescribed proton pump inhibitors in 2013, $9.5 billion of sales in 2012. It's commonly prescribed for gastric esophageal reflux disease and ulcers of the small intestine, as well as esophagitis. These proton pump inhibitors don't just decrease the amount of acid produced, they have an effect on the microbiome. They will decrease the diversity of the microbiome, which is a problem. You want there to be a very diverse flora in your gut. It's kind of like when you go to the Amazon. When you go to the Amazon forest, there's tons of diversity in the forest. And if you are a timber company and you decide to come through and cut down all the trees and you say, don't worry, everybody, I will fix the problem now. I'll just plant a bunch of trees. Usually you're planting the same variety of trees or that kind of thing. You're not going to have the diversity. It's going to take a long time to come back. And this is what you're doing to yourself when you put yourself on antibiotics, when you put yourself on medications and this type of thing. Now, proton pump inhibitors also infect the parietal cells. The parietal cells are what are responsible for producing acid in the stomach, but they also are responsible for the, what is it? I have to go back and remind myself about IF, the intrinsic factor production. So intrinsic factor, remember I told you that's responsible for B12 absorption. So this is going to be a problem when you're on proton pump inhibitors. You're going to have malabsorption of vitamins and minerals, including vitamin B12, vitamin C, calcium, magnesium. It increases your risk of osteoporosis and increases your risk of infections, including like Clostridium difficile and having things like pneumonia. So I want to share with you the story of Dr. William Beaumont. Dr. William Beaumont is a surgeon who was practicing in the early 1800s, and he happened to take care of a Canadian gentleman by the name of Alexis St. Martin in 1825 after Alexis St. Martin had been shot in the stomach. And what happened with Alexis St. Martin is that when this wound healed, it never totally healed back over. So that wound, that defect in the abdomen, you could always see a hole that went into the stomach. And when it healed, it became what we call a fistula, like an always open hole there. And what Dr. Beaumont decided to do was to experiment on Alexis St. Martin. He would look to see what did the stomach look like. He would take food and he would tie it up with string, and he would then put it into the stomach through this hole, through this fistula, and he would see how long it would take to digest food. And so he came up with certain observations and found out a number of things. Here are some of the things that he discovered: that gastric juice is produced for the digestion of food. There is no gastric juice produced during fasting. Okay. Another thing that's interesting is that there is a relation between the amount of food that you take in and the quantity of gastric juice that is produced. Some of us think that we can just eat however much we want to eat, and somehow the body will take care of it. But apparently there is a finite amount of gastric juice that can be produced, and if you eat more than that, that food will pass on through undigested. Now, this undigested food will stay in the stomach, or it passes into the bowels in its undigested state, and this can cause a nervous irritation, pain, and disease. Now, some of you think that disease just happens, and you're wondering, why did it happen? But for those of us who have struggled with overeating, I struggled with overeating for many, many, many years. And I'm sure that it contributed to a lot of the issues that I might have even today. Now, the same problem happens when meals are eaten too quickly after each other. So not just eating too much at one meal, but if you don't wait enough time between your meals, like say you ate breakfast at 8 and then at 10 o'clock you saw a peanut or a donut or even a piece of fruit, that snacking, that eating between meals will cause you to not have enough gastric juice, not have good digestion, and you're going to have undigested food that is going to cause inflammation, pain, and nervous irritation. There are other factors that influence how well you digest, and he found out that gentle exercise improves the activities of digestion. So after you eat, it's really good to take a 10-minute walk. Nothing really, really strenuous that's going to take blood flow from the digestive system, but maybe just some gentle exercise that promotes movement. Now, the other thing that helps is when you eat warm foods and when you are in a warm environment. So there are some people who are struggling with good digestion. We have them put a heating pad or something on their stomach while they're eating, and that also helps. Stimulating condiments are injurious. So you might be wondering, what are stimulating condiments? Those would be things like vinegar and peppers and hot and spicy foods, mustard, ketchup, all these kinds of things. Alcohol use always produces gastric disease. And so for some of you who are trying to use alcohol in moderation, I would caution you that you will always have some gastric disease there. Oily food is difficult to digest. We don't, in our cookbook, we have a cookbook that we have written called the Autoimmune Plant-Based Cookbook, and we have no free fats in that cookbook. We get all of our fats from the food source itself, from seeds, from olives, from avocados and coconuts, and we don't use any free fats. When you are suffering from a fever, there's no gastric acid secretion. So if you don't feel like eating when you're febrile, don't eat, because your stomach is not ready for it. When you're angry, this will retard gastric acid secretion, and you'll actually have bile from the liver, reflux into the stomach. And that's a problem, because that's going to decrease the acidity of the stomach, and it will affect digestion in that way. The small intestine is the next part of the digestive tract. It comes after the stomach here. The small intestine is a very long structure. It's 20 feet long. It's as wide as a finger, so not very wide. But it is responsible for 95% of nutrient absorption. So if your small intestine is not healthy, You're not going to get good nutrient absorption. You may find that you're anemic. You may find that you're low in other nutrients, and it could all be that your small intestine is not functioning correctly. Now, the surface area of the small intestine is enormous. It's about 2,700 square feet, which is the size of a tennis court. And the reason for that is that the lumen here has these finger-like projections called villi. And each of those villi are lined by epithelial cells. And those epithelial cells are called enterocytes, which have finger-like projections on them. They're called microvilli, and this is what we call the brush border of the small intestine. The small intestine has 3 different segments: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So they all have their different roles. The duodenum is where you have chemical digestion happening, because you have the pancreas and the gallbladder that are releasing its contents into the duodenum. So the gallbladder is releasing contents in there because you want to neutralize all the hydrochloric acid, and the pancreas is releasing enzymes and other things to help continue the digestive process. You'll also have mucus that is being put in. So this mucus that your digestive system puts out, it should be a very balanced mucus layer, right? What I mean by balance is that it needs to be there. It serves a protective mechanism, but if there's too much of it, that's a reactive type of thing. Like when you get sick and you have all this mucus that comes out of your nose, this is a reaction to a problem. And so when you see mucus in your stool and that kind of thing, that indicates that there is some dysfunction happening. The jejunum is the second part, and that's where you have absorption of most of your nutrients. And then the ileum is where your B12 is going to get absorbed, and it's where you have a lot of immune cells in these things that we call Peyer's patches. Now, the large intestine is where you have reabsorption of a lot of water, vitamins, and ions. And so if you don't have a large intestine, you're going to end up having very, very watery stool, and you're going to lose a lot of your vitamins and ions. Now, the large intestine is also where you have a lot of microbes like bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and these are essential. These are very essential. They help with neurotransmitters, they help with gut health, and the microbiome is something that helps with fermentation. Bacterial breakdown of fiber to short chain fatty acids that are used by the colonic cells for energy. So if you are not eating fiber, you're not going to be making these short chain fatty acids. You're not going to be feeding the colonic cells, and you're going to have dysfunction and leakiness of the gut. So the colon here, you can see that it starts with the cecum and the appendix down here on the lower left. It goes up through the ascending colon, and then across through the transverse colon, the descending colon here, and then the rectum and the anal canal. So it's really important that we protect the gut epithelium. That gut epithelium, I told you, it is a single layer of cells that separates the external environment from the internal environment, and it functions to help you with absorption. It also is a protective barrier. So it's kind of like when you go outside and you're working in the garden and you have your skin, right? And so if you were to cut yourself, if I were to go by a rose bush and get scratched up, that's one thing, my body would be able to heal that pretty quickly. But if I did that every single day, what can start out as a very local, small problem is going to develop into a systemic problem, because my body is going to be every day having to use up resources that otherwise would have been used for, like, serving for cancer and fighting infections and these types of things. Now the body is trying to heal a certain area of the body that shouldn't be getting injured each and every day. Now, this is something that we have to consider when we eat. When we eat foods that are not helpful for the body, or we're eating toxins and chemicals and that type of thing, or we're exposed to a lot of these things through the environment and mold and that type of thing. Now you have a setup for inflammation because you are using up resources that the body would be normally using elsewhere to have to go and repair some of these other things that are happening. And so you can see the importance of eating foods that are not going to call so much of your body's resources. Okay, so again, this is the lumen of the small intestine, and you can see the villi that are lined by the enterocytes. The enterocytes are just one single cell layer thick. And so if you have injury to that one single cell layer thick in, body of cells, you can see you are going to put your gut at risk. And we find that people who have damage to these enterocytes, they will have increased permeability, or what we call gut leakiness. So anything that injures those intestinal cells will cause a leakiness in the gut. You will have food that is undigested, that might have access then to your internal organs. You have, or to the blood and that kind of thing. You have bacteria and other pathogens that are going to have access to your body. And so you'll find that when there is what we call dysbiosis, where your microbiome, that family of bacteria, viruses, and fungi, when they're not in balance. You'll find that when you have certain infections, if you're taking certain drugs, if you're not eating what you should be eating, or eating too much and this type of thing. If you're eating high fat, high salt diets, just going out to eat at any one restaurant, you're going to be eating too much fat and too much salt, and you're going to put yourself at risk of leakiness, having cancers, being febrile, having poor circulation. So those of you who have heart failure, those of you who have heart rhythm abnormalities, you're much more at risk of gut leakiness. And when you have something like inflammatory bowel disease, like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and this type of thing, that also when you have diarrhea, when you have a change in your nutritional status, all of these things are going to put you at risk of damage to the intestinal wall and increased permeability. So let's talk a little bit about the epithelial brush border. I had shared with you that this is the microvilli that line the enterocytes. This is where your digestive enzymes and your bacteria, viruses, and fungi live. They live on that brush border, and they're covered by and protected by mucus. This mucus is 98% water. It protects and lubricates the GI tract, but as I said before, it also is produced in response to pathogens and to dysfunctionality, and it's a protective response. So I want to show you that this mucus. So here are the enterocytes. I'll show you these cells here are the enterocytes, the cells that line the intestinal tract. Here, this blue is the mucus. And then you can see up on top, this is the gut microbiome. These are where the pathogens are. And so if this mucus is not healthy, you can see that all those bacteria, they're going to get much closer to the enterocytes, and you put your body at risk there. So in review, just briefly, what is necessary for a healthy gut epithelium is for you to have healthy circulation, have a healthy nervous system, have a healthy brush border, have healthy microbiome, which is that family of bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and then also to have healthy tight junctions. So I'm going to just describe real quickly what tight junctions are. Tight junctions are connections between cells. It's kind of like, imagine that if you were standing in a circle and you didn't want anyone to get through, if you just stand shoulder to shoulder, it's pretty easy to break through that circle. But if you were to stand holding hands, it would be much harder to break through these hands that are holding each other. And that's what your tight junctions are. Your tight junctions are these connections between the cells that help so that when you eat something, that food needs to go through that process of digestion and being broken down to its simplest parts before it is then absorbed by the enterocytes. So when you have gut leakiness, when you have loss of these tight junctions, you are going to now have these larger undigested food particles. You're going to have bacteria and other foreign proteins that are going to be allowed access into the body. This will activate the immune system, put you at risk for infection, put you at risk of inflammation. And that tight junction dysfunction will happen with a number of different things. If you get an infection, if you're febrile, if you have any type of inflammation going on in the body, when you're exposed to certain toxins, I mentioned here LPS, which is lipopolysaccharide, which is a toxin that is commonly found on foods, especially animal products like dairy and meat. And you cannot cook out the toxin LPS. It's a toxin that is tightly adherent to it's on gram-negative bacteria. And so if you're eating a lot of meat and dairy products, you're going to have a lot of toxins. Radiation is going to cause tight junction dysfunction, blood sugar abnormalities, blood pressure abnormalities, food sensitivities, autoimmune disease, inflammatory bowel disease, and gluten. So I want to share with you about gluten. This is from a study that was done by Dr. Alessio Fasano, who is a professor at Harvard, and his lab discovered zonulin. Zonulin is a protein that is found in zonulin is a protein that is produced when the body is exposed to gluten. So when you eat wheat and barley, I'll show you here, the gluten causes these enterocytes, the intestinal cells, to release zonulin. So this zonulin is this blue ball. And when the zonulin attaches to a receptor on the enterocyte, that purple thing, it causes you to lose your tight junctions. Your hands stop holding each other, and now you have things that are going to get into the body that would otherwise not have access. And that will cause your body to start an inflammatory cascade. And you can see from left to right that as this inflammation happens, that this inflammation will now act upon the enterocytes themselves, the intestinal cell walls themselves, so that they become damaged, and you will have malabsorption to the point that no matter what you eat, you are not able to do things like maybe gain weight as you would like to. So you'll see people who are eating so much and they can't gain weight. You will see people who are anemic, who have other nutritional abnormalities, and it is because there are certain parts of their digestive system that have had damage to the intestinal wall. And when you have this leaky gut, it puts you at risk for leaky brain, because not only do you have enterocytes that protect the intestinal, that provide an intestinal barrier, you also have a blood-brain barrier, which is a barrier that's formed by cells that line the blood vessels, especially these blood vessels that interact with nervous tissue. We call this the blood-brain barrier. Now, some people think it doesn't matter what medications I use or things that I eat because I have a protective blood-brain barrier. And what they don't realize is that that blood-brain barrier is not perfect, and it will be compromised by the same things that cause leaky gut. Okay, so it breaks down with inflammation, brain injury, blood flow issues, circulatory problems, like if you have a stroke or something like that. So what are some inflammatory triggers that can be associated with leaky gut, leaky brain? Pharmaceutical drugs, even things like vaccines, oral contraceptives, hormone replacement therapy, infections like EBV, bacteria, fungal infections, toxins, mold, pesticides, plastics, heavy metals, hair dyes, cosmetics, and body care ingredients. Did you know that 2,000 new chemicals are produced in the and that are produced and released into the environment every year? 2,000 every year that your body has to figure out how to deal with. They will put it into your cosmetics, they will put it into your furniture, into your clothing, and it rubs up against your body and interacts with your body, and it has not been tested for human safety. So think about that when you are using your cosmetic products, when you're doing things like body care, you know, nutrition, preservatives, emulsifiers, thickeners, vinegars, pickled food, and gluten. So these things are going to be inflammatory triggers. Stress is a huge inflammatory trigger. Bitterness, resentment, lack of forgiveness. So for those of you who are struggling with these emotions, this is an inflammatory trigger. And then lifestyle practices like lack of sleep, lack of exercise, lack of sunlight, and lack of fresh air. So the way that it's going to manifest is fatigue, joint and muscle pain, mood instability, acne or skin rashes, congestion, brain fog, memory loss, headaches, food cravings, abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, cramping, and bloating. And it can manifest as disease, autoimmune disease, infections, cardiovascular disease, arthritis, cancer, allergies, eczema, asthma, mast cell activation, infections, diabetes, and dementia. So in conclusion, the small and large intestine have different functions and anatomies. The single cell epithelium is important for both small and large intestinal function. A breakdown in health is going to cause a breakdown in gut health and vice versa. And healing the gut can be instrumental in recovery of general health. So I just have a few suggestions to how to eat for good health. Hydrate well all throughout the day, but avoid drinking with your meals so that you avoid diluting the stomach acid. Minimize soupy, watery dishes, chew well with small amounts of food, rest the gut between meals, make the dinner meal light or fast the evening meal, and that will give you proper rest between meals and for a long period at night. Eat in a pleasant atmosphere, exercise before your meals, go for a light 10-minute walk after your meals to help with digestion, avoid strenuous exercise after eating, and don't overeat. So I know that I had to kind of hurry through that and I didn't share a whole lot of stories or that kind of thing, but maybe we can do that in the question and answer period, and so that we can give Mercy a chance to answer some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Joyce. I personally learned quite a bit. I obviously have a few questions myself after Mercy answers some questions, maybe because we know that, yeah, she doesn't have a lot of time. So yeah, it's amazing, the gut-brain connection as well. We're actually going to have a mental health month in June, and to discuss especially gluten, especially gluten and mental health. So it's amazing what gluten can do, and we will ask you a few more questions. So should we start the Q&A with Mercy?
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much again. So we did introduce you, Mercy, a little bit. So we know that you've worked as a nurse. You were trained as a doctor in Mexico and worked as a nurse for about 20 years in the US. I'm just trying to pin you to the screen, Mercy, and then unmute you as well. Did you mute yourself, Mercy, or? Not sure. Okay, we can hear you now. No. We can't hear you now. Is it just me or no one can hear? Did you mute because of the announcement? Or I unmuted you a couple of times now. I'm not sure why it's doing it.
Okay.
And again,
awesome. It was in the, I don't know, what something happened.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
some questions I can start answering. Some questions, could you please review how to heal, restore proper protein absorption? That's the big question, the protein absorption, because that's the main issue, the main problem. When you cannot, when you still have leaky gut, you're not gonna be able to absorb proteins. And even though I know there is another note here that says, I have treated and healed leaky gut confirmed by via lab, but this is not really, it really doesn't show. There probably not good test. I don't think there is a good test to show if you're healed from leaky gut. The only way that you can tell is when you're absorbing proteins, when you're gaining weight, when all your symptoms are disappearing. That's how we know it. So how can I restore the absorption, right? That's the main question. So to absorb the absorption, there's so many things that need to be done. So we have a protocol, and the protocol to help deal with the leaky gut is going to be this an onion broth that we do. It's one onion with 3 cups of water, then a little bit of salt, and we put about 5 cloves of garlic, and we boil it for about 20 minutes, and yet you drink that. The more you drink, the more it's gonna heal your leaky gut. Another thing we do is the aloe vera, the fresh aloe vera. We do 15 minutes before meals and at bedtime. So these are things that help heal leaky gut, but you also have to remove all the foods that are linked to leaky gut, foods that you're not able to absorb or able to process or are causing a lot of issues. And some can be proteins from legumes. For example, the legumes that are very hard to digest are the black beans, the red beans, the pinot beans, those are the heavy legumes that have a lot of lectins and anti-nutrients. So we want to remove those for a while. And any food, any protein food that is giving you bloating, that means that you cannot tolerate yet. So you have to find out what legumes you can tolerate. Usually it's mung beans or lentils. Usually it's the white beans, but you have to sprout it well and then cook it. Some people have to even cook for 2-3 times, remove the water, the first water when it's boiling, and sometimes they have to do a second time and the third time, and then they can tolerate them without getting bloating. So if you having bloating or joint pain, things like that, that means that you're not able to tolerate certain foods and you have to remove them for a while. So another thing that we do is we don't eat the grains at this time. We only use pseudo grains, and the pseudo grains are things like buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, and so those are easier. But some people are so sick and they've been sick for so long with leaky gut that even those foods, you have some of them you might be able to tolerate, some you might not be able to tolerate. So you have to see which one you tolerate, and they have to be well cooked. Sometimes we use a pressure cook, not necessarily pressure cook, the Instapat that cooks for a little longer and cooks well. And sometimes people can tolerate foods when they do that way. So it's a big process. Some people, it takes maybe sometimes 2-3 months to heal the leaky gut. So then you're able to tolerate better in other foods. So another thing is nightshades. We remove at the beginning because nightshades can contribute also leaky gut. A lot of people cannot tolerate leaky gut. We had in our lifestyle program that we had 10-day lifestyle program that we have, 60% of people could not tolerate nightshades, and they could not tolerate even heavy proteins like sunflower seed and pumpkin seeds. You know, the 30%, the 40% could, but 60% could not. So you might need to even remove those foods that, you know, we base our protocols. So some people, you know, the cases are going to be much more complicated. So it is, you know, I do coaching one-to-one with very difficult people. And so we have to figure it out what the person can tolerate for a time until the leaky gut is healed. And then we reintroduce some other foods. So that's how we manage the leaky gut dilemma. So I think we have more questions here. Do you sprout legumes? How do you sprout legumes? Okay, we sprout legumes, we sprout the pseudograins, we sprout the fatty acid seeds, which is the sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds. So what we do is we soak them for 12 hours. In the next 12 hours, what you do is, you know, you rinse it really well. You can put it in a strainer, keep it in a strainer, just moist. You don't want them to be soaking anymore. You just want them to be moistened. And then you keep it like that for 12 hours, and then you rinse them well, and then you can use them. So that's how we do. We usually do 12 and 12 hours. Some people might need to sprout them for 24 hours to able to tolerate some legumes. So that's how you do it. We also do in the canning containers, those 64 ounces, and they have the lids that have the screen there. So we do that, put it upside down, because you don't want to be soaking after 12 hours. So that's how we sprout it. Somebody saying, and you mentioned the onion broth, you mentioned more you drink, the better. What would be a minimum? So what we do is about 1 cup, usually at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And but some people are so sick that they have to do, I like it, you know, even myself, I've been drinking 3 cups a day. So I want to keep healthy, decrease any inflammation I have, because, you know, with all the problems that are happening with toxicity in the world, you know, we have to take better care of ourselves. So even now, you know, I used to do this for my husband that was very sick with COVID. So I wanted him to recover fast. So I will give him 4 cups of onion broth that I will give him throughout the day. So, and then he recovered really fast. Of course, I was doing other things too, very anti-inflammatory foods and juices and things like that. A lot of foods high in vitamin C. And so he recovered very fast, and now he's healthier than ever. All his labs are perfect. So this is, you know, it doesn't take that long to recover. So now I told my husband, you know, maybe you want to make me the broth now that, you know, I work hard doing it for you with everything else. So now he's doing it for me. So I'm drinking like 3 cups, and I'm not sick right now, but I'm just drinking I'm not feeling sick, but I'm just drinking my 3 cups of onion broth. So some people that have I was helping somebody with arthritis, and whenever she will get flare up, because we're trying testing different foods, she will just drink the onion broth, and the flare up will go away. So it is really, really very helpful, these super healing foods that we do. And there is so much more. I will highly recommend everybody that if you have a very serious issue with leaky gut, with food sensitivities, because there's so much to learn, you can join our med missionary training. We do train medical missionaries, and we teach all of this. We teach how to eat. We give you a 4-day menu. We give you a protocol. We answer, you know, we do questions and answers. This is a class for 6 Sundays, and it's 2 hours every time. So we give you all the details of everything we do. Then Dr. Joyce does lectures also. So there's so much information, but, you know, anything that we can help you right now and let you know what we do in short time, we'd be happy to do it. So Any other questions?
There was another question, Mercy, sorry. It said, how do you know if you have leaky gut?
Okay, you know it because you can, the common symptoms are bloating, joint pain, brain fog, rashes, itch, neuropathy, numbness, tingling. Those are the most common symptoms, but some people don't have any other symptoms. When I was sick, I didn't have any digestive symptoms, no pain at that time. When I started getting sick, my only symptom was shortness of breath and my iron was down. So I didn't know until I ended up in the hospital having blood transfusion. And, you know, I wasn't absorbing iron or other minerals because I had leaky gut, but I didn't have symptoms. So for some people, it's going to be low minerals also. So it's very important to do yearly, check your hemoglobin, your iron, check your, even, you know, some people might have even Hashimoto and they don't know it because the TSH is normal, but the antibodies can be high. So it's going to show pretty soon in the TSH for all of you that are familiar with the Hashimoto, hypothyroidism.
Mm-hmm. We actually had a question about that on YouTube, but I actually put the link down, the interview that you did with HubChat Health, because I had a question about the onion broth, and I believe you had the onion broth recipe there. I can't remember if you described how to make it, but I put the link down as well.
Awesome.
There was a question, the person says, I eat a gluten-free diet because of Hashimoto and history of SIBO. I'm attending a gut health workshop at the moment where they say you should only avoid gluten if you have celiac disease. Confused.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I am dealing, you know, I used to deal with, you know, autoimmune, but celiac is a gluten problem, but it's more than gluten. You know, people that come to us, it's not just gluten. There's other foods that you know, when you have leaky gut caused by celiac or any other autoimmune, you're gonna be sensitive to many other foods, and it's the protein foods the main problems. So for us, what we found out is it can be corn, soy, oats, and yeast besides gluten. So this is the 5 foods that are the big problem. So most of people test positive for that because we use a lab that is it is a stool test that they do. And usually those are the big 5s that show positive. They show positive for many other foods, but these are the more problematic foods that we notice. So it's not just the gluten. If you have problems with gluten, you more likely have problems with many other foods. So we remove all those foods, and we have the book that is, we remove all those foods and we remove nuts. Instead of nuts, we use the fatty acid seeds, which is sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds. And also we remove the grains and we use the pseudo grains. So in the book we still have nightshades, but if you've been sick for a while, you should also remove the nightshades. So that should help. And of course, the legumes that I mentioned, that are the easier to digest, I will use those instead of heavy legumes. So that should help a lot.
Awesome. When it comes to gluten as well, Mercy, can you please explain about the gluten issue? Is it all gluten, or because of the hybridization, because of the spraying? Is it all gluten? Can we still use ancient grains if we don't have any gluten intolerance, or any gluten is bad? Sorry, you're muted again. See, I'm not sure what's happening there. Yeah, okay.
Okay, I don't know. I couldn't unmute myself. Okay, so the problem with gluten is that, you know, it's highly hybridized. It's been hybridized so many times that it's not the same protein that it used to be anymore. And also it's because the glyphosate, you know, is being linked to me, that's the worst poisoning that we have. And it's so it is linked to that. So the body has a very strong memory to that poison. So then even if we get a healthy gluten, let's say the Asian gluten, and the, you know, for a while, perhaps you're gonna be okay, but later on, you're still gonna, you know, start reacting and having issues. So that's the problem, because gluten is not a, you know, evil food, right? God created, and, you know, it's one of our staple foods, is the bread of life and all that, but, you know, Satan has destroyed it, not just the gluten, but other foods also. And so at this time, you know, we had to, you know, look for other things to make our breads. So we do our breads based on buckwheat or quinoa, and we make these very tasty breads, very, very close to the gluten breads. So, you know, there's always ways, you know, God has given us always ways to replace these things, these staple foods that are, you know, causing, you know, special, I mean, amazing, terrible symptoms and destroying our health.
Yes, exactly. So if you have time for another question, Mercy, I was wondering, and this is a question I'm wondering recently. I used to be a big fan of cayenne. So could you tell us what place cayenne has in your lifestyle center, if any place? Because Dr. Joyce talked about the spicy foods and how they are not good for us. Could you class that as a spicy food, or?
So, you know, actually cayenne is a very good medicine, right? So if you have heart attack, if you have a stroke, if you have, you know, you need to stop bleeding, it's a very, very good plant medicine, right, that God has given us. But, you know, I see Dr. John Clark that you interview. So he came to our church, you know, in the middle of nowhere in California. You know, we live in the country, in the mountains of California, and he came, and, you know, this is something I learned from him. You know, the spirit prophecy confirms it, because it's anything that is gonna be so stimulatory, it's not gonna be healthy for us. So he said it raises the HCl 700 times more. So I never forgot that. So I use it as a remedy, but we don't use it on a regular basis, because, you know, it's going to stimulate the acidity too much. And then it's going to cause gastritis and issues, you know. So that's one of the reasons we do not use it regularly.
Okay, that's really good to know, because I know people that will use it on like on their food every time they have a meal, and I used to be one of them, and I drink when I have throat pain. But yeah, I guess it's good to know the science behind the cayenne pepper. So do you have any more time, Mercy, or you need to go?
I have 4 minutes, and then maybe Dr. Joyce can tell these amazing stories that work.
You won't have time. No problem. I guess, yeah, I wanted to touch on the sprouting, but you did that. And I guess the vegan diets, that they can be, not every vegan diet is different. So do you not use any type of oils, like not even the cold pressed oils?
You know, for us, we keep everything that is fat in the freezer. Let's say our coconut that comes, the shredded coconut, our sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, we put in the freezer. But, you know, the fats, they get rancid and they get inflammatory, right? So we don't use any type of free oils. We use the fats, you know, the way God created, but we don't use it that way. So, and for us, it has worked well. I don't think we need it at all. You know, for salads, we use this avocado dressing like mayonnaise that everybody super love it, and it's so simple to do it. So there's always ways to replace the oils.
That makes a lot of sense, the oxidization and the free oils. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Mercy. I think we took a lot from that Q&A.
Thank you so much for inviting us, and God bless you and your ministry.
You too. Have a safe flight. Hopefully we'll have you over again shortly.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay,
I'm
now
not
it's
sure why it does that. It keeps
that's
like
okay. That's okay, no problem. So I don't know if Mercy answered all the questions, which is great. But or if there are any other questions that might we might be able to answer.
Yeah, so there are a few more questions that if you're happy to answer, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay, so if anyone has any more questions, can you please type your questions so that Dr. Joyce can answer if time allows. But this is a question I get, and even as of yesterday, I got this question about B12. So obviously you explained a bit about B12 and where the absorption happens. And I try to explain to people as well that B12 doesn't come just from animals. And there is this conception that it only comes from animals. Would you be able to explain to us why animal foods do have B12, and as vegans, how can we get it? Or do we get it on the food, or it's a result of proper digestion?
You know, it's been a long time since I've looked at B12 and its sources and that kind of thing. I do know that when I was going through my medical school training, that one of my instructors had told me that those who are purely vegan, they can still have fairly healthy levels of B12. And I was kind of interested in this. And I found that to be true for myself. When I test myself for B12, I would normally be around, whatever units you're using. I was around 600, which for us here is fairly good. And this is with me being totally plant-based and not taking in any animal products. But I did find that when I was going through major stresses and I was at risk of leaky gut and these types of things, that my B12 levels would sometimes drop to like 300 and that type of thing. And so I do think that this B12 issue is not just a matter of how much you take in. There must be some recycling of it or even production of it that's happening. I mean, because like there are people who don't take any animal sources in who are still able to have healthy levels of B12. That being said, I think it's really important to check your B12 levels regularly, once a year at least, maybe twice a year if you're someone who is not that stable and well. And consider taking a B12 supplement. I take a liquid source that I have to put under my tongue. It's really hard to find a good B12 source, I think, because a lot of them have natural flavors and these types of things. What are you taking, Sose?
I'm actually taking like tablet forms under the tongue. Yeah, so they are vegan.
They're vegan,
Yeah, I
but
believe
I
they
feel
are.
like a lot of these things,
Yes.
they have some kind of fillers or natural flavors or that kind of thing, right? And so I'm trying to find something that would be better. So I think like, the more that we get our food from local sources, the garden, this kind of thing, we might be able to get some B12 in that way. Mercy will not, some people when they wash their produce, they'll wash it in very strong like vinegars and hydrogen peroxide and this kind of thing. And Mercy, she some of her stuff that she grows, she won't even wash it. She'll just eat it straight from the garden and that type of thing. And some people feel like that puts you at risk of parasites and worms and this type of thing. So I wonder if there is some happy medium where you can wash off some of these things, but not wash it so well so that you're totally getting rid of your the bacteria and other helpful things. Maybe there are bacteria that, what is it? There's a plantarum, what is that bacterium that is on plants that can survive stomach acid and get into the gut and colonize. And I think that there is a lot to this counsel that we have in the spirit of prophecy to eat food straight from the garden, from the orchard. And I think that it'll help with a lot of these vitamins, minerals, and enzymes as well.
I think when I asked one time Dr. Clark, he did mention that just a normal light washing should not get rid of the B12, because I was wondering, because sometimes I use vinegar as well. Because like if we buy from a supermarket and I want to make sure that all the pesticides are washed off, I will use some vinegar sometimes, or like a fruit and veggie wash. But yeah, the one that I take, it says contains no egg, milk, peanuts, soy, tree nuts, flavors or preservatives or artificial colors. But I've kind of learned to like read through that as well, because sometimes artificial flavors might not be there, but might be natural flavors, and which are still not good.
Right. And sometimes if they add them in such small amounts, you can have like a certain small amount of it and still not say that it's in there. I know that for like hydrogenated fats and that kind of thing. So it's with washing and that kind of thing. That's a question. I don't use those vinegars and that kind of thing, but that's why it's good even if you don't have a big garden or that type of thing, if you could have like something on your patio, potted plants and that type of thing, to just grow some of your own food, you will have more enzymes and minerals and that type of thing that you are exposing your body to. You're going to help with your microbiome, getting as much as you can, even herbs and that type of thing. So
yeah, that's true. Thank you. So someone asked, how much protein per day would you call adequate intake as a vegan? Having the onion broth, does this interrupt the break required between meals for the gut to then digest our food properly later?
The onion broth I wouldn't consider, because the onion broth, you shouldn't have any solid substances in there. So I would look at it kind of like a tea, right? And so when we do our meals, we have a protocol that we have in Med Missionary, and that protocol calls for juices. So what we do with the juices is that we strain them of any fiber, and we drink them about 30 minutes before we eat our meals. And then we drink water about 2 hours after our meals. And we also start drinking whatever herbal teas and that kind of thing as well, apart from the meal. But just a tea should not be then interrupting that break and starting that digestive process again. How much protein per day would you call adequate intake as a vegan? And again, I'm really sorry. It's been a number of years since I have looked at adequate intake for a vegan. What I remember is that it's much less than the 100 to 120 grams of protein that your average American is eating. And it's more like 40 grams, if I remember correctly. But I don't want to be quoted on that, because it's been like 10 years since I've looked at that number. What I also remember is that as long as you get adequate nutrient intake, that you should have adequate protein intake. And so it's not something that I think about a whole lot, to be honest with you, because the way that we have everything set up in the cookbook, for instance, if you're eating from all these this variety of foods, we get like not only the greens and the fruits, right? We get the pseudograins, which are high in protein. We get the legumes, which are high in protein. And we get them in the form of cooked cereals, in the form of breads and that kind of thing. You're also going to have some protein in your greens. And it's not, negligible. As someone who has been a plant-based person for most of my life, and I've never been anemic, for instance, and that type of thing. I know that you can't base your health assessments based upon one person or anything, but I think that there are millions of people around the world who don't eat meat. who are not protein deficient. And so I don't think it's something that people have to stress about so much.
Yeah, I believe from what I remember, it's about 20 or 30, it's under 30 grams for females and under 40 for males. So I think it's pretty difficult to be deficient.
Yeah. And the thing is that most people are getting 100, if I remember correctly, most Americans. And so that is going to be really, really hard on your kidney. And it really does contribute to kidney failure, which we're seeing a lot of. And so, yeah.
Yeah, we do definitely have that problem, and the toxic waste as well that comes from trying to convert protein to carbohydrate or something else. So the question that comes up or is quite relevant is with the food combinations. Dr. Joyce, do you have like any specific advice for fruits and vegetables not together? And when we sprout the grains, do they become herbs, kind of like, can we class them as herbs and use them with even fruits, let's say? How do you combine your fruits and veggies, seeds and nuts?
Okay. So we do recommend that you eat your fruits at one meal and your vegetables at another meal. That will help you in having the ideal digestion, because they digest at different rates. Okay. So what I tend to do is I eat breakfast with a bunch of fruits, and then I eat lunch with my greens. That being said, there's a little bit of question as far as what is a fruit and what is a vegetable, right?
Yes.
And so there can be arguments. Some people will say your greens are herbs and herbs are neutral, and herbs can be eaten with fruits or vegetables, and we tend to think that the greens, the herbs of the field, are vegetables, and we'll put them in with the vegetables. Now, some people will say that your root vegetables are vegetables and should not be eaten with fruits, right? We put your tubers like potatoes and this type of thing as like a neutral root vegetable. I know that sounds that does not sound correct, but we're getting that one from, there's a Spirit of Prophecy quote. I'm going to have to have Mercy give that to me, where she talks about when you eat your dinner meal that you can eat bread with fruit. And then in another quote, she says to eat that a nice combination would be grains, fruits, and I think roots.
Wow.
And so when I saw that, that's what made me feel better about, including like sweet potatoes and potatoes with the breakfast meal, which some people were questioning. Now, as far as some of these other things, we tend to go like more with the sweet, sugary fruits as being fruits. And then the foods that are more neutral in taste, like avocados, we put them into the neutral type of thing. We will include them with like vegetables. We make salad dressings with avocados, for instance, and that type of thing. We've done the same thing with like lemons. We'll eat lemon juice, in our salad dressing. And so there is a little bit of question here as far as what is a fruit and what is a vegetable and how to classify. And I think different people will have different ways of doing it, possibly. This has worked for the large part for what we're doing. And I think that, as we're praying about it, God will guide us and answer these questions. I think it's better to think about these things, though. Some people think, oh, that's just too much, you shouldn't be taking it that far. But we have some counsel in this regard, and so I think it's good to pray about it, think about it, and try to use our minds to figure it out.
And like you said as well, it has worked for you, and it has worked, I guess, for all the people that you and Mercy have been helping. So that's, I guess, a good guideline, you know, a good thing to
Yes.
go by.
Yeah, I mean, like we have some miracle stories. Like last week, my sister called me and she said, Joyce, there's an older gentleman. I think he's like 70s, 80s. He's someone who's very health conscious, grows a lot of his own microgreens and this type of thing, and helps a lot of people when he was younger with health stuff. But he wasn't really eating the way that we eat, because the way that we eat pseudo grains. We don't eat grains while people are trying to heal. We soak and sprout everything, and we're very consistent. Even with making our bread, we soak and sprout all the ingredients before we make it, and we're super, super consistent. And a lot of people aren't crazy about doing that, right? Not until you get really sick. And so this gentleman, he had come to our program a couple of years ago, had bought our book, and he was having a lot of chronic pain, despite him being on a plant-based healthy diet. And so out of desperation, he decided to try our cookbook. And he was faithful to it. He did it for 3 weeks. And he told my sister last week, he said, Judy, tell your sister thank you because my pain is all gone. And she said, Joyce, aren't you so excited? Aren't you so encouraged? I just wanted to let you know. And for me, that's the reason why I do this, because I had chronic pain, and I will have chronic pain if I eat other ways. And so this keeps me functional, and this keeps me healthy. And so I do it. But I also know there are people who are getting their health back by doing things that are slightly different. And so I know that God works through many different avenues, and it's the Lord that heals. And I believe that God blesses these efforts. We are doing the best with what we have experienced. I went through plant-based diets. I went through many of these Adventist programs myself, and I could not get better until I started doing some of these things, soaking, sprouting, all that kind of stuff. And I do believe that it's helpful, but I know that some people don't need all of that. And this is for people who are maybe have tried everything. I also believe that it's very helpful for what's happening today. Today we're living in a super toxic environment. We're being exposed to all kinds of pandemic type of issues. And as we are trying to figure out how are we going to survive through these really difficult things, I think that to learn about something that gives you something beyond just the laws of health is very helpful. So, yeah.
I did put down all the relevant links for your website and for the autoimmune recovery cookbook.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and the online version is actually very, very affordable. Like for me, that probably, won't get it, shipped to me.
Right, right.
Yeah, physically, it's very affordable. I had a look, and yeah, I would encourage everyone to do the same. So yeah, I guess these health issues that I have had my own journey as well of going through health issues, and then sometimes it could be like I consider these as blessings in disguise sometimes, because then you learn more and you help others with what you've learned, especially when it comes to vegan lifestyle. Like I went through a phase of thinking if only people went vegan they would be healthy, but I guess even that has like different, we can be vegan, we can be like Mercy was saying about the nightshades and about the grains. I think maybe later if we can have you back, we will talk more about the sprouting and soaking.
Oh yeah,
science.
Yeah. Well, I just want to encourage you because, I think, in Ezekiel 14, Ezekiel mentions those three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job. And he says that, even if they were alive, they would only save themselves. And I do believe that they represent those three angels. And that third angel's message is represented by Job. And Job suffered from health issues. He suffered from people thinking, hey, what's wrong with you? Why are you so sick? Why is God punishing you? And I think a lot of us are going through experiences that may make people look at us that way and think, hey, you must have done something that deserved this type of thing. And we might be questioning ourselves. And so just to have courage that as you are going through your health journey, that God still has a plan, and we want God to be glorified. And whatever we are suffering on this earth, you know, as you said, it can be a blessing if we bring it to Jesus. And you know, we just want Jesus to be glorified at the end of the day. So we just are going to be faithful.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Dr. Joyce. I'm sure everyone else was blessed like I was. This is exciting, really exciting when you know that there is hope. You don't have to be sick, and yeah, God has a plan, like you said, and He wants us to be healthy.
Amen.
So, okay, well, like I said, I hope we will have you back another time, maybe for testimonies. But
yes, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. God bless, and have a good evening. Have a good night.
Good evening. Okay. Thank you. Bye, Jose.
Thank you. Bye. So everyone, thank you very much for joining again. And I just want to remind, we didn't get the chance to talk to Mercy or Dr. Joyce about the prayer rally. As I mentioned, they have organized a prayer rally praying for freedom of conscience leading up to the general conference session in June. Anyone that can join, I have actually put down our email address, takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com. Please email us and I'll be happy to send you all the information to join. And then you might actually be in the mailing list as well. And Dr. Joyce sends the information when they go online, but it's basically for Australia. It's Thursday starting from 11. So every Thursday starting 11 a.m. and it goes until 11 a.m. Saturday, Friday morning. So for 24 hours, basically, they have the prayers, and every ministry leads out in an hour of prayer, and we pray and lead out in a devotional. So will this presentation be posted on YouTube to re-listen later? Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you. So usually I try not to remove the live link, because then you can share and access through the live link again, the one that was posted to access now, so you can watch it there. We also do edit sometimes, shorten them, but the link that you have will still be available, and maybe the edited version as well. So yes, so have a look again on YouTube once we finish this meeting on Zoom. On YouTube, the links are still there for everything, for our Facebook page, for our YouTube channel. So subscribe, share, and spread the good news and share the good message of health. So thank you very much. And for any questions, please email us. Thank you. God bless. And we will actually meet with you next Saturday evening, 8 p.m. with Dr. John Clark to discuss country living. So looking forward to seeing everyone then.